In this video, I will show you what a healthy decision-making system looks like, how the system can be polluted by narcissists, toxic people, and some well-meaning people who don't realize they're polluting the system. We will then see how to recognize when the system is being polluted, and we will look for specific questions to ask ourselves to realize if a system is being polluted or if the person is trying to pollute our system. So why would someone manipulate you? Simply put, they want you to act a certain way or do something or think something, and you don't want to do that spontaneously. And if they're not respecting your right to not think like them or do as they want, they might threaten you into doing it. But if they don't want to threaten you, manipulation is much more subtle because you won't realize that they are changing your behavior according to what they want. Narcissists will use manipulation to pollute our decision-making process so that we do as they want under the illusion that we're doing it from our own free will. Some common signs that we've been manipulated and which might apply to you are when we are surprised at the results we're getting, we're not sure why we're getting them, we're not sure what to change, and we keep doing the same thing again and again. We talk about good people or bad people, or we think that there are good people and bad people in the world. We use words like fair or fairness, and we look for fairness, and we're surprised when things are not fair. And we use sentences like should, things should be this way, people should act that way. Those are telltale signs that we've been manipulated because reality proves to us that what we're thinking doesn't match reality. According to the model I use, there are 4 steps to a healthy decision-making process. The first one involves gathering data, gathering facts. These facts, this data, is then fed into what we can call an algorithm. The algorithm tries to make sense of the data and use this in order to produce an outcome. This outcome can be a way of behaving. It can be a prediction of what is going to happen. It can be a mental model. Once we have this outcome, the 4th step is that we confront the outcome to reality and see if it matches, and it probably doesn't match, but that produces more data that then feeds into the algorithm, so we can start adapting the algorithm. We can try to adjust it so that we have an outcome that matches reality as closely as possible, which then helps us get the results that we want to get in our life. If we let somebody's system function on its own, they will produce whatever outcome seems right to them based on the data and based on the algorithm. When people try to manipulate us, they want to force a specific outcome. And when they do it, they give us the illusion that we arrived at the outcome based on the data and based on an algorithm, so we buy into it. When actually, we did not have free choice to get there. They pushed us there and we did not realize. In order to do so, toxic people start with the outcome they want and they reverse engineer the algorithm that they want us to use and reverse engineer the data that they want us to see in order to produce this outcome. And when it comes to the relationship with reality, they simply deny it and they claim that reality isn't there, or that we're mistaken, or that what we observe is not real, is not true. And this is gaslighting. This system has a number of vulnerabilities, and I will show you now how they infiltrate the system and they pollute it. Let's start first of all with data. In terms of data, you have 3 types of data that feed into the algorithm. The first type of data is data that is false. These are lies, things that are not true, that are invented, that have no correlation with reality. The second type of data is the type of data that we usually look for, which is data that is both true and relevant. And the third type of data that they use a lot is data that is true, but is irrelevant. What they do here is they make it difficult for us to understand which data is true and relevant. If we don't know what is true and relevant, we're going to make decisions based on data that is largely irrelevant, and that will produce results that are also irrelevant, and we won't understand why. And of course, they'll also feed in some data that is false, and usually they mix it together to make it difficult to understand. When we point out something as false, they'll point out that something else is true. It might be true. It doesn't mean it's relevant. When we trust them to sort through the data, because we should always trust them from their point of view, as it gives them power. When we trust them, they are the ones who are choosing what is being input into our system. The person who has the responsibility of choosing the data in your system is you, and in my system is me. If we have disagreements, we can talk about it. I've got no right to tell you what to input into your system, and it might be a good idea to beware of people who believe that they can tell you how you should be managing your system. The second point of vulnerability where they attack is in the algorithm. The idea of an algorithm is a bit like a filter. And one of the key ideas is no filter tells us 100% of the information that we need. It's therefore a good idea to have access to multiple filters, represented by these different colors, and simply decide in which situation do we want to use which filter because it helps us think more clearly. Every filter is limited in its usefulness, and some of them are not useful at all, and they just really confuse us, and we should just be avoiding those ones. In a healthy relationship with someone, the person will respect that you have your choice of filter or filters. You choose which ones you want to use in which circumstances, and you will see the result. And if we have a disagreement on the filter, I don't know if you're right or wrong, and it's not up to me to impose mine. Now, narcissists will say that they have one filter that explains everything, and that every single other filter is wrong, is bad, and if you use it, that makes you a bad person. Instead of having a debate of ideas, they will attack you as a person. One of the big red flags of narcissists, they don't debate ideas, they attack people. If you let them impose the filter they want onto you, you're handing over control of your life to them. And if you're under the illusion that one specific filter explains away everything, you've already handed over control of your life to someone else. You can, of course, choose to hand over the control of your life to someone, but then the result should not really be a surprise. They reverse engineer the outcome that they want. They force an algorithm onto you to force you to think a certain way, and then they cherry pick the data or invented data or lies that back up the outcome. And this leads you to arrive to a certain conclusion, which is the conclusion they want you to arrive to. Now, the real question is, how does this stack up against reality if you compare it to reality? Well, this is the real question. If it works out, it does. If there's a mismatch, what happens then? Well, the answer is quite simple. They will simply claim that if there's a mismatch, the problem is reality, or the problem is what you're observing, or what you're observing is wrong. And that will then produce to feed back into the data that is false and polluted, trying to make you doubt what you're observing. And what you know to be true and what you see to be true is the definition of gaslighting. And this is one of the main points and main symptoms that the system has been compromised and polluted. You can no longer trust your ability to observe reality, or you think there's something wrong with your capacity to observe, and this breaks the entire system down. And when they've done that, they're on their way to winning. At this point, let's just remember quickly what is at stake here. It is knowing who rules your life. Who is in the driving seat of your life? Is it you or is it someone else? And to what extent do you let other people influence you and manipulate you so you make decisions that you think are based on your free will, but actually you've been led to go astray and go somewhere you don't want to go? One of the real questions is, are you happy with where you're at? If you're not, possibly, probably, there's some level of manipulation. So now let's look at some telltale signs of people who are being manipulative. One of the first questions to ask is, if you come to a different conclusion than them, do they respect your point of view, or do they try to make you change your point of view? Do they get angry? Do they attack you? Do they label you? Do they criticize you? Do they tell you you're stupid?
Do they lose their temper?
If that is the case, chances are you're dealing with someone who's trying to be manipulative, whether or not they realize it. There are some questions we can ask people to assess to what extent they are being manipulative, whether they know it or not. One of them is to ask about the conclusion and say, it seems that you've completely made up your mind about the outcome, about your conclusion, and that nothing could make you change your mind. And now we're referring to the algorithm and to the data. Nothing could make you change your mind. If the person says, yes, my mind is made up and nothing can make me change my mind, you know that they're going to be manipulative, and they will deny the data, and they will reject any changes to the algorithm or any inconsistencies or flaws that naturally exist in their algorithm. Now, the next question you can ask is simply, what do you think of people who disagree with you? What do you think of people who have come to a different conclusion? A healthy person will say, well, I don't know what data they have. Maybe the data is wrong. Maybe my data is wrong. I don't believe it is, but if my data is wrong, I will change my point of view. So maybe their data is wrong. Maybe they have a different prism, a different filter, a different algorithm. Maybe they weighted different elements differently than I did, and that led to a different conclusion. That is a healthy way of seeing disagreement. A toxic person, a manipulative person, will attack them. If they come to a different conclusion than me that makes them a bad person, they will find various labels to attack and slander people. Why do they do this? Sometimes it's simply because in their mind, their simplistic mind, that's how they really see the world. They don't understand that different people actually have agency because they don't respect different people. But maybe also that is a way of threatening you. If you disagree with them, you will be tarred with a label. If you don't come to the same conclusion and don't act as they like, you will be a bad person. People who divide the world into good people and bad people are manipulative people. Another key red flag is when you observe that someone is denying reality or claiming that the problem is with reality. Imagine if someone has to design a wheel and they produce a square, and then when people point out that it doesn't roll, they say, well, it should roll, the problem must be the roads. That's not particularly helpful, and that is someone who is going to be manipulative and have difficulties adjusting their system. Remember that if people are unwilling to question the algorithm they use or the outcomes they have, they've basically constipated the system. And you want to be aware of intellectually constipated people. Another question to ask them is simply, how did you reach your conclusion? A healthy person will be willing to share with you the data that they have and share with you the algorithm. And if you realize that anything actually doesn't match with reality, then they will be revising the data and the algorithm, and that produces the output. A toxic person, on the other hand, is going to be confusing about the data. They will cherry pick. They will say things that clearly don't quite add up, and the logic won't really make sense. And if you try to explain the logic again, you're going to realize, if you're honest with yourself, that some things are missing, and it doesn't really make sense to you. If you want to reach a certain outcome, that's a sign that you've been manipulated and you're trying to manipulate yourself. If you won't simply accept that data is what it is, if you won't accept whatever comes from the system, and especially compare it to reality and accept reality, that's a sign that you've been manipulated and that you're manipulating yourself again.